When I was a couple weeks short of my 70th birthday, I started thinking about my mother's mother, who lived to be 100, and her mother, who lived to be 102, and my father, who lived to be 90, longer than anyone we had ever heard of in his family. I began to think that maybe our generation could be the first to routinely live to be 100. When I talked about this at family dinner one night, my granddaughter, who was 5, said,
"What are you going to do for the next 30 years, Grandpa?"
Hello, I'm Dr. Janet Price.
And I'm Gregg Kaloustian. And we are Oldish. And this is our podcast, Oldish.
If you're oldish or know someone who is, please join us every week for conversations amongst ourselves
And our special guests
about what it means to be oldish in the 21st century.
If you ever wonder whether you're getting old, you're oldish. What are you going to do for the next 30 minutes?
Hi, I'm Gregg, and I'm oldish.
Hi, I'm Janet, and I'm oldish. Welcome to another episode of Oldish. Tonight, we're going to talk with Gregg to hear a little bit more about pickleball nomading. He's had a new adventure, and I want to hear all about it. First, Gregg, maybe you could just give us a little recap of what you mean when you say pickleball nomad.
The Pickleball Nomad is a kind of a combination of a couple of my oldish interests / passions, one of which is pickleball. I play pickleball a lot. I've been playing for about 4 years, and I'm not very good at it, but I'm not terrible either. So that's good. I also, a few months ago, decided that the time was right for me to stick my toe in the van life experience of having a van that I can travel in and essentially live in while I'm traveling. It's a little bit more than a vehicle to drive around to go camping in. The idea is that the camping will be a little bit more extended, perhaps. There's a bed in the van and that sort of thing. I've been working towards the pickleball nomad life for a few months now, and I'm getting ready to take a longish trip. I'm hoping that sometime toward the end of October, I'm going to get in the Pickleball Nomad van and head west to visit my daughter and her family out in California. And that I'm not going to do what I've done in the past, which is to put the pedal to the metal and race right across the country. I'm going to look around for places to play pickleball and camp. And so I may take, instead of 3 or 4 days, I might take 10 days to 2 weeks to drive out for the visit in California. And then when I get out there, I'll be looking around for places to play pickleball, which I've never done before. I've discovered that I really like playing pickleball in different places. I like a lot playing with the people that I play with all the time. But I've also discovered that it's a pretty good way to meet new people and to see a bit about how people are living. So a couple of weeks ago, part of a kind of almost, it wasn't exactly a maiden voyage for the van. I did a trip out to Minnesota and back in the spring which was really the maiden voyage for the van, but it was a maiden voyage for Pickleball Nomad because the point of the trip was to find places to play as well as places to stay. So I launched myself one morning for the town of Belfast, Maine, which is in the mid-coast area, where I know that there are a lot of people that play pickleball most mornings. And I'd played there once with a friend last year and found that the people there were welcoming and friendly and not bangers. And, anybody who knows anything about pickleball knows what I meant. And at some point, for those of you who don't know, I'll explain it. But so the people there aren't bangers. The pickleball courts in Belfast, Maine are in the most beautiful setting of any pickleball courts anywhere. They're in the city park in Belfast, and the city park is adjacent to Belfast Harbor. So the pickleball courts are within sight of Belfast Harbor, which is a fairly active harbor. There's lots of boats coming and going. It's part of the Gulf of Maine, and it's just really gorgeous there. It's a challenging place to play because the courts are actually down in a little hollow, and the wind swirls. And one of the most interesting and challenging things in playing pickleball outdoors is the wind. Wind becomes a fifth player on the court. And in some places, the wind is blowing strong from a direction and you can kind of tell what it's going to do. So, you know that if the wind is blowing hard from behind you, you have to soften up the shots that you hit or they go long. But in Belfast, it seems like the wind swirls. And because fall is starting here in Maine, there are leaves on the court and you can actually see the leaves blowing in a circle on the pickleball court. And it's just baffling about, what do you do? But everybody is playing with the same wind, which is one of the fun things. Sometimes people will stop playing because it's too windy, but I don't. It's like everybody's playing with the same wind. So, let's factor that in. Once you catch on to the wind, often things like I hit a lot of lob shots, and that's not a really good idea when the wind's blowing behind you because you're not going to be able to keep it in. Or if the wind's blowing in your face and you hit a lob shot, there's a pretty good chance it's going to come down exactly where the person wants to smack it, as opposed to coming down behind them. So I set off on this journey. I had 2 apps that I used to help me plan this. I spent a bit of time, probably a couple of 3 weeks, just not constantly, but a couple of 3 weeks planning it. There's a pickleball app that's called Places to Play, and it's pretty good. It's not perfect. The big challenge for Pickleball Nomad is how do you find out where the games are? But this Places to Play app is pretty thorough, but it's not up to date because it's all volunteers. I would scroll the map to approximately where I wanted to go, and I would look around and there'd be an icon on the screen for indoor pickleball or outdoor pickleball. I would click on the outdoor pickleball icon and it would say, how many courts? Does it cost any money? How many players are usually there? Fairly often there's a contact phone number. And a whole lot of times there's a little thing on the bottom that says last updated in 2017 or 2018. So the information isn't really solid, so to speak. I didn't use that to find the Belfast courts because I knew where they were. But where I wanted to go next was that I heard from somebody that people play in Ellsworth. So I wanted to go there. So I used that app to find out where to play in Ellsworth. And then I used this other app that's called iOverlander, which is an app also crowdsourced that people use to report places where there are filters, but the filters that I use are for something that this app calls wild camping, which is a place where you can park your vehicle and sleep in it, but it's not like a campground. So you wouldn't put out a tent. That includes places like everybody knows that people in RVs park over behind Walmart, and it includes places like that. iOverlander includes check-ins so that if you look at a place fairly often, you'll see that somebody was there 2 months ago or 6 months ago or something, and what their experience was. So you get a pretty good idea of what you're getting into before you get there. So I planned the trip using those 2 things, and I knew about Belfast, but I didn't know about anything else where I was going. I just heard rumors that people might go there. So I used these 2 apps to plan where was I going to play and where was I going to stay near where I was going to play. So, and that's, to me, is the main data requirements for Pickleball Nomad is where am I going anyway? I don't think I'll have very much luck just getting in the van and headed in that way and hoping that I pass a pickleball court and there's people playing on it. That's I don't think that'll work.
I mean, it sounds like a great kind of map or a great way to plan, like you said, if you want, like you're going to go across country, for example, or wherever you're going to go, is to use those pickleball sites as points in your travel. That makes sense.
It's going to make the planning different from what I expected. Back when I first started thinking about van life, I was thinking, I'm just going to go there, and practically every town you pass has a place you can camp in. But that's not exactly what I want to do. But if I can go on the map and scroll forward in the general direction that I'm going until I find some pickleball icons, and it might be 200 miles from where I am, and it might be 500 miles from where I am. That'll help me plan my driving for the day. How much time would I spend driving? And then once I play, where am I going to stay? So, or if it's a if it's like I found in Belfast and in Ellsworth, there's open play in the morning, then where am I going to stay the night before so that I can go there and play? And then other questions come up. It's like, where am I going to find a place to take a shower either before or after I play, so that there's some level of hygiene that's expected on the pickleball courts that aren't necessarily expected in the Nomad places, but the pickleballers have some standards. Anyway, so
how did that work in this situation? So how do you find how do you know as you're going to a place what the facilities will be like, or is it something you check out when you're there?
Well, that's a good question. So the way that it worked out on this particular trip is I didn't need to worry about any of that stuff before I went to Belfast. I just had to get there. It's an hour from where I live. So that wasn't any big deal. So I got up in the morning, and instead of driving in the other direction to Brunswick, where I usually play, I got in the car and I drove toward Belfast. So that was good. And I met some really wonderful people playing there. I'm going to make a prediction that some of the people that I've met playing pickleball in Belfast will become friends. And I will play there fairly often. It takes me 40 minutes to get to the courts where I play in Brunswick, and 60 minutes to get to the courts in Belfast. And that's not a big difference. I'm pickleball nomad here. That's not that 20 minutes ain't going to stop me. So I think I'll do that. But then when I went on from Belfast, the next stop was Ellsworth, which is a couple of hours from Belfast. Was it? Yeah, something like that. And I had heard that the Places to Play app told me that there were outdoor courts at the YMCA Ellsworth. And it indicated that people sometimes play there in the afternoon and often play there in the morning. So I had plenty of time. So I drove up to Ellsworth and went to the Y. And I had a wonderful conversation with the very helpful staff at the Ellsworth Y. I'll give them a big shout out. Really nice people, interested in what I was doing, had all the information about the pickleball that was to be played. And they told me that people sometimes play there in the afternoon, but people always play there in the morning. And they had no idea whether anybody was going to show up to play in the afternoon or not. So I thanked them, and I was hungry. So I went out to the van and I sat there next to the pickleball court and I ate my lunch. And I noticed that the wind was blowing 15 to 20 miles an hour. And that's a little, I mentioned that playing in the wind is interesting, but that's a lot of wind. I wasn't sure that I wanted to play in it. And I was pretty sure that if people were at all hesitant about playing in the afternoon, that wind would do it. So I stuck around there for an hour or so eating my lunch. And then I decided that what I really wanted to do was come back in the morning. But that raises the question, okay, where are you going to stay? So I got out the iOverlander app, and I found that there was a place about 25 miles away that I would not have, there's no way that I would have driven past this place and said, oh, that's where I'm staying tonight. Maybe in the future, but not as a baby nomad here. But the iOverlander app described it. It's a roadside rest area on Route 1, about 25 miles east of Ellsworth. So it's, for people who don't know what Ellsworth means, almost everybody knows where Bar Harbor is. So it's about 10 miles past Bar Harbor, right on Route 1. There is a rest area. It's got toilets and picnic benches and no signs that say no overnight parking. And the iOverlander app had a number of people who had stayed there who said, it's right next to the road. And it was literally the left-hand side of my van was not more than 15 feet from Route 1, maybe 20. So, but it was pretty close. And so, of course, big trucks go by and the van shakes and all of that stuff. But I didn't care. So So I got there about 5:00, and there was nobody there, and there was plenty of room there for me to park the van. And I was confident because the app had said, there's no problem parking here. There's no problem spending the night here. There isn't really room for one of those giant RV things. But there's no, if you got a van or something reasonable, there's no reason not to park here other than it's maybe exposed and it's maybe noisy. So I stopped there and I got out and I took a little walk around. What the app didn't say was that behind the picnic benches, there's a little path, and that path leads down to a beach. And it's a completely private beach. There are no houses anywhere near there. And so it's a completely private beach for anybody that's staying at the rest area. I think it's a pathway that gets used for people that harvest clams and stuff. But the clam harvesting is kind of, at least in that area, is on hiatus because it's kind of clammed out, so to speak. So they're not currently allowing clam harvesting. So there was nobody there except for me and the 7 different kinds of seabirds that I saw. So I walked down and I sat on a rock on the edge of the beach, and I watched the sun go down over the bay, and that was just stunning. This is like, oh boy, I like this. I'm liking this nomad stuff.
Right. I mean, it sounds like the nomad experience is a lot about discovery. Discovering pickleball places, discovering people, discovering sites, discovering paths, discovering, private or, beaches and sunsets.
Exactly.
I hadn't thought about that before. So it was an interesting just connection for me right now of the nomad experience equaling discovery.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it myself, to tell you the truth. But, because I figured I'd be going from campground to campground or, something. I don't know. But this was so that it was wonderful. And so I spent the evening until it got too cold. It was really windy. But until it got too cold, I sat on a rock on the beach watching the sun go down with these seabirds drinking a beer. It was amazing. And totally, it was like my private beach for several hours. And when I got up in the morning, I had coffee in the thermos and I went down the path and I sat on the rock and had my coffee with the sun come up because I was on this cove that ran east to west. So in the afternoon, I could see the sunset, and in the morning, I could see the sunrise over the water. So it was just amazing, So, okay, that's all I need. It was like heaven.
Yeah, that sounds lovely.
Yeah, it was heaven. So then I got up on the next morning. I got up and I went back to Ellsworth, which was like, I don't know, half an hour away. And when I got there were a number of people who are just arriving and just starting to play. They have 4 courts that are new, and so the surfaces are good. The nets are good. And people started showing up, and, the first couple of 3 people said, hey, you want to play? So, I didn't have to go through that. How do I approach this? I went up on the court and I was carrying a paddle. So it was obvious what I was doing there. People said, hey, you want to play? And they explained to me how they work the rotations and the open style play and so on. And it was very good and very friendly, crazy windy. I mean, the wind was going steadily in one direction, other than like what it had done in Belfast, where it was swirling, steadily blowing in one direction, perpendicular to the courts. Of course, there's 4 of them and they're all in a row. And so half the players had a very strong wind at their back, and the other half the players had a very strong wind in their face. And, when you change out at the end of a game and you rotate through and go play somewhere else, you might have played 2 games with the wind at your back, and now you're going to play with the wind in front of you coming at you. And so it was this constant adjustment to the wind, and everybody was laughing. I loved it. Everybody was laughing. You'd smack the heck out of the ball and it would just barely clear the net. And just everybody was laughing. Or if the wind was at your back, I figured out after a while that if I just barely touched my serve, just barely touched it, it would stay in. But if I hit it at all, it would go out. So it was just a lot. It was just a lot of fun and very friendly people. A different, slightly different demographic. There were younger people playing there than who I played with most of the time in Brunswick, or I had played the day before in Belfast. It seems like morning pickleballers are usually retired. But there were a few people that I don't know them. So they might have been retired. They could be, for all I know, tech moguls or something. And but they're all very friendly. And one of the things that so far there's a trend is that everywhere I play, there are people who have some mobility issues for one reason or another. There's a lot of, in our age group, there's a lot of people with aging knees. And so a lot of people have sore knees, and a lot of people getting knee replacements and hip replacements and so on. So every place that I've played lately, there are people there with mobility issues, and everybody treats them kindly. Very few people, with really very rare exceptions, and usually they get all shamefaced if they do it. People will do things like, if you know that the person you're playing against can't back up or can't turn around and run, you don't play a lob over their head.
Sure.
But also I found that a lot of people with mobility issues can't run around much, but if you hit a ball close enough to them to hit it, they're really good at precise return shots, and they can kill you. So, but everybody's just friendly and kind, welcoming, and all that good stuff. So the beginning of my Pickleball Nomad journey couldn't have been better. It was just really lovely. Where I wanted to go next was really down east. So I had heard that people played in Kaloustian, Maine. Kaloustian is right on the border. It's right across the St. Croix River from St. Stephen. So that's where you cross into Canada. And I had heard that people played there, and the Places to Play app mentioned that there are courts that are part of the Kaloustian Rec Department recreation area. But I didn't talk much about time, but there was a phone number for a guy who said, if you have any questions, call this guy. And I haven't figured out yet whether I want to name people in the podcast, so I'm not going to yet. But anyway, I don't think he would mind, but I didn't ask him, so I don't, I'm not going to name names, but he knows who he is. He was very friendly. I sent him a text before I left, saying I'm doing this and I'm headed up toward Kaloustian, but the listings are out of date, and I don't know where and when people actually played there. And he wrote back to me right away and said, I moved to Florida, but I'm still in touch with the people. I will add you temporarily to our Facebook group. And what we do with, so that was really sweet, right? And what we do with the Facebook group is we don't have open play times. We just send out notices. Anybody want to play tomorrow afternoon at 5:00, and you organize a game that way. Mm-hmm. So I knew I was going there. I didn't know when I was going to play, but I knew I was going there. But also when I started looking at the iOverlander app that showed me this place outside of Ellsworth, it showed me a place a couple hours beyond there that was right on the coast in a town called Cutler, and it's the state of Maine owns some. They're just called public lands, and they're not quite a state park. There's no facilities or whatever, but there's a parking lot and a trailhead and signs on the trails and and that sort of thing. But there's not like it's not as organized as a state park. And I didn't know about this until I got there. But the iOverlander app said there's a large parking lot at the trailhead, and because there are campsites that you have to hike to, it's not like a campground where you park your car in your campsite, but there are campsites. There are 5 of them that you have to hike to, and they're 3 to 5 miles. Well, you got to leave your car somewhere, so it's okay to have your car there overnight. And so there were several reports from people who had parked their car there overnight. So I said, okay, I'm going there. I'm going to do some nomading for a couple of 3 days before I go play pickleball again. So I drove there. It took a couple hours to get there from Ellsworth. And I got there kind of mid-afternoon. And I went up and I looked at the map on the trailhead. And there were several different loops, one of which, or two of which I figured I could do in the daylight that was left. And they went down through this spruce forest, just acres and acres of spruce forest with trails through it. And where they came out was on bluffs overlooking the ocean.
Wow.
There was this one trail that said it's down and back is 2.5 miles, but it connects up with this other larger loop. So I said, well, I'll do the 2.5 miles. That's nice. And I'll come back and I'll have some dinner, set up the camper to set up the van to sleep in and whatnot. And I walked down and I think I ran into like 4 people. When I got down to the ocean and I saw that the trail went down along the bluffs, I said, I'm not going to go right back. It's not dark yet. So I went on and I ended up walking 6 miles and it was challenging. So anyway, I did that loop. And as I was coming back up toward the trailhead where I knew I was going to spend the night, my phone battery was dying. And I used this app on the trails called All Trails, which tells you where you are on the trail and how much it's going to take you to get there and so on. But my phone battery was dying. The sun was going down and I had no idea I was going to walk 6 miles through the woods and uphill and down dale and, and all of that stuff. So everything was running down as I was getting back. And I had some concerns about, am I actually going to get out of the woods before it gets dark? Because I don't mind being in the woods in the dark, but I'm tired. So anyway, so that all worked out. I got back to the van and there were no vehicles parked in the part of the parking lot where I was. And so I got the van set up and made my dinner and got the bed all set up and all of that before it got dark. And so I spent the night there. But I had learned about these campsites. And so there are 5 campsites. They're first come, first served. And it turns out that they're right on the bluffs. So like 100 feet away is a cliff and water. And you have to put your name in a logbook so that people will know whether they should do that 3 to 5 mile hike to get to the campsite. And there were at least 2 campsites going to be available on Saturday morning. And it looked like Saturday was going to be just a beautiful day. And so I said, I didn't know I was going to do this. So I didn't have like a real backpack. I had a duffel and I always have a tent in my car. So I said, I got a tent. But I didn't really have everything that I needed. But I said, you know what? I'm never going to have everything I need. I'm just going to go do it. But then I looked at, after my phone charged up again, I looked at the weather and it looked like it was going to start raining Saturday night and rain all day Sunday. And what that meant was if I was camping, I was either spending the day in a tent in a rainstorm on the edge of the ocean, which could be cool, but I wasn't prepared. I didn't have like rain pants or, that stuff. Or I could hike back out in the rain, 5-6 miles, hiking back out in the rain to get to my van all soaking wet. And that's not going to win any prizes either. So I decided that what I would do was make a notation that someday when the weather looks good, I'm going back there. And I decided what I would do is rather than do that camp, there's an 11-mile loop down through a different section of woods and takes you by the campsites. And there's 4 or 5 miles actually walking along the edge of the ocean. So I decided that I would do that. And when I found the campsites, they're just absolutely stunning. They're just holy smokes. So I put that on my list of places to go back to, as long as I get the stuff I need. And I plan a little bit better. I just wasn't fully. I didn't know I was going to do that. So I did this loop, and I got back. I was more careful with my phone, so my battery wasn't dying, but the sun was going down, and I was exhausted. 11 miles of hike along there. It was just, I was exhausted. But I got back before it got dark, and I knew where I was spending the night. I was spending the night in this parking lot. There was nobody around at that point. There were 3 people who had gone down to camp. So those 3 cars were there, but I knew that there weren't any people there. So I had the parking lot all to myself. And that was great. And when I woke up in the morning, it was pouring rain. So I spent the day in the van reading and thinking about Pickleball Nomad and reading some more. And, I don't know why, but I had pretty good cell signal there. So I was able to, check the news and all that crap and look at the weather forecast, and also send a whole bunch of messages back and forth with the Facebook group about going to Calais, because I knew nobody was going to play on Sunday because it was raining. But Monday looked okay. And I didn't plan on spending that long away, but I'll go. I spent all day Sunday and I just couldn't get enough people to commit to playing. So I figured on Monday, I'll head up to Calais and maybe by then I'll find somebody to play. And if not, I'll find where the courts are. I figured I would just go there and hit some practice balls if I couldn't get a game, because I wanted to play in Calais. I wanted to be able to say that I played in Calais for a very silly reason. I mean, it's just totally arbitrary, but I ran into a guy that I play with in Brunswick. We were having a beer. We didn't plan on having a beer together, but, I had a beer. He had a beer. There he was. He said, "Hey, Greg." So he said, "What are you doing?" And I told him I was doing this and that my next trip is out to California. And he said, "Oh, Calais to California." So I had to do it, right? I had to be able to say that.
It makes me think about, it might be, and you might already be doing this, but it might be interesting to start a log and start with Calais, since it's Calais to California, which is awesome. And just keep track of every towns, every place you go, so that at the end of, you just can keep track of all the places you've played. And yeah.
So that's what happened. Is I went up and this guy who had moved to Florida sent me the pickleball courts in Calais are actually lines on a tennis court, and they have portable nets, and they keep those in a lockbox next to the tennis court. So this guy was kind enough to send me the combination to the lockbox. I got there, and there was water on the court. It had been raining a lot, but there wasn't anybody around. And I got the net out, and I set up some cones. There were some cones in the box, and I had a dozen balls with me. And so I went and practiced my serves, and I got so that I could kind of get somewhere near one of those cones every once in a while. So I was doing that. This was actually kind of fun. I was doing that, and a woman and two young girls, they were 6 or 7 maybe, showed up and wanted to hit their pickleball on the other court because their grandparents had given them pickleball paddles and pickleballs. And so the mom and the two little girls were there, and they were just wicked cute. So I did that for about a half an hour. I said, okay, that's enough of this. And I headed back down toward Belfast, thinking that I'd found a place where I could spend the night at Belfast on my way home and play again in the morning. But going through all of this, the weather wasn't looking promising. But there was someone who was very kind to me on the Belfast courts and was curious what, she had questions. She was just very friendly and kind. And so when I was up in Cutler with nothing to do on the rainy day, I sent her an email and said, "It was very nice to meet you. It'd be great to see you again. I think I'm coming down to play in Belfast on my way back through. And, I'm going to find some place to stay," and so on. And she said, "Well, it's not a good night to spend the night in your van. So it's only an hour from there to where you live. So just keep on going, but stop in for dinner on the way through." So that was nice. She's a wonderful cook, just really wonderful cook. It was a real treat, and a very interesting person. And so the pickleball nomading is fulfilling all of my pickleball nomad dreams.
Yeah.
In these wonderful places, I'm playing pickleball with some really nice people. I'm making new friends. I'm spending a lot of time outdoors and getting some stories. You've known me a long time. I really like stories. And I'm getting stories by the dozen here. So, so the pickleball nomad thing is working out. Wouldn't have worked out as well without these apps, though, because it just made it just easier to discover things and made it possible to discover things I never would have found this place in Cutler. And this place in Cutler, it was paradise. It was paradise. I took when I did that 11-mile loop on Saturday, I walked at least 6 or 7 miles before I saw any other people. It was perfect. I mean, if you like hiking, one of the problems with hiking in Maine is that everybody loves to hike in Maine. And so, you go for a hike and you're going to meet 30 people on the trail. But I didn't. I was 7 miles before I saw anybody. It was great.
So I want to ask you, as we think about this Oldish podcast, if you can share something that you've been sharing a lot, but something that excited you, and maybe something that was scary from the perspective, the lens of being Oldish. So in particular, the fact that you're Oldish, what was something that excited you? What was something that scared you?
Well, the exciting part was just to discover that there's, as I thought, one of the things that's appealing about pickleball is that people who play pickleball, for the most part, I mean, the demographic is like the definition of Oldish. There are young people that play pickleball. I read someplace recently where the average age is now below 50, but I don't ever see those people. Who I see is people that are way older than 50. It's exciting to find people who are alive and still having a good time, and finding new people, and the friends that I've made in just the short time that I've been doing this Pickleball Nomad thing. There are people that they got good stories. So it's fun to hang out with them. And one of the things that I touched on before we actually started recording this was in the first Pickleball Nomad conversation that we had before I actually was doing it, but was just in the contemplation stage. One of the questions is, what are you afraid of? And that's changed. What I thought I was going to be afraid, or what I was afraid of then, turned out to be not scary at all because of strangely enough, because of the podcast. So one of the things that I was afraid of is it's hard for me to approach a group of strangers and invite myself in. It's always been hard for me to do that. I had a lot of trouble with that when I first started playing down in Brunswick. By the time I finished the 40-minute drive to get there, I was just totally a mess. I was all anxious and so on. But this Pickleball Nomad has given me a character. There's a character to play. So it's not Gregg approaching strangers. It's Pickleball Nomad swaggering up to him. Man, I'm Pickleball Nomad. I'm gonna play. You guys, what are you guys doing? I don't announce Pickleball Nomad, but it gives me the confidence to just go up to people and say, "Hey, can I play it?" And
absolutely, yeah,
it's great. Yeah, so that eliminated one of the fears, and I have a new fear yet. But the glory of Maine Downeast, I've always loved it, but I always thought that Acadia National Park in Bar Harbor was the best place in America. And it's gorgeous. I still kind of feel that way, but it's a national park, and there are like 3 million people go there every year. I would bet you that 1,000 people don't go to this place in Cutler, and it's got hiking trails, and it's got gorgeous ocean crashing up against rocks. It's the same coast, but there's nobody there. I didn't know that. So that was pretty exciting. I think one of the things about the van life is that people who are doing van life stuff, that nomad lifestyle, is that they are seeking out and finding the unbeaten path. That's almost by definition is, you're not, if you're living in your van or whatever it is, it's expensive to stay in campgrounds. So you got to find unlikely places to stay. And some of the more popular places that out west in particular are public lands where you can go and camp there if you want. You got 2 weeks and then you ought to move along. But those places are off the beaten path because the tourists are going to the national parks and the Grand Canyon, and up here in Maine, people are going to Acadia National Park. They're not driving 25 miles past it to go for a hike all by themselves. So that's pretty exciting.
It's really exciting. And it's everything about this is exciting. It's exciting that you are doing this. And it's, in a way, the definition of Oldish, as we have been thinking about it and wanting to talk about it and share these conversations about it, because it's the reality that being oldish means exploring off the beaten path. It means making discoveries, being able to laugh, finding people that treat us with kindness and we can treat with kindness. There's so much to experience in this part of our lives. And so I'm so happy for you, Gregg, that you had this idea. It was pulling at you. You combined your passion for pickleball with this exciting new idea of being a nomad. So I am really looking forward to this continued journey for you. And I'm looking forward to continued conversations as you are on more extended pickleball nomad journeys, like what sounds like what's coming up soon, and shorter ones.
Thanks, Janet. That's it for now. Thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, please tell a friend. If you'd like to hear more, check out our other episodes. Follow us wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts, and come back weekly. Ratings and reviews greatly appreciated. You'll find more info on the apps Gregg used and links to more info on the places that he visited in the show notes. Tune in next time when our episode will feature a conversation with a bucket list specialist. You can support our podcast and the fight against Duchenne muscular dystrophy by buying an Everest End Duchenne t-shirt or commemorative flag or one or more of the books Gregg has written at Gregg's website. To get more information on Dr. Janet and or Gregg, check out the show notes for links to our websites. You can reach us with comments, suggestions, or requests at oldish@canoncom.com. It will always be true that the most fun I ever had playing pickleball was just us hitting the ball back and forth and laughing on the little court next to the library with the river flowing by and the eagles wheeling overhead.